Hello everyone. In this quick tip, we will be covering how to make layers follow other layers over time. So for this, I am going to be creating a shape. Let's start with that. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on the ellipse tools to create an ellipse. I'm going to change its fill to white and I'm going to remove the stroke. I don't need a stroke for this. So what I want to do at this point is I want to resize this ellipse to be about 100 by 100. So I'll go to its contents. I'll go inside the ellipse path and change the size by changing its constraint, turning off its constraint, and I'm going to make it 100 by 100. So that is the shape that I want to work with. Now, what I want to do at this point is I want to name this shape layer the master, and that's because that is the master that all the other will follow. So all the other copies of this will be followers. Now, it doesn't have to be called master. It could be called whatever you want to call it, but I use the word master so that I have a visual guide. That's the first thing I want to do to that layer. The second thing I want to do is I want to add a slider control. Now, a slider control is a type of filter that allows you to add almost like what the name says, a slider. And that is just literally a slider that gives you values from whatever to whatever you want within that slider reach. So what does that mean? Well, let's go ahead and drop that into the circle here, into the shape, and this is what it gives me. It gives me a slider, and the slider allows me to go this way or negative values, and that's all it does. It just passes that value to that slider. This will be the slider will control the delay within for any subsequent followers for that particular master. So if when the master moves, the followers will follow it depending on how much value I have added to this slider. So you can rename that slider control to something like delay slider, or something like that. Not deli, delay. And let's use that value for controlling that, like I said. Now, what I want to do at this point is I could use a copy of the same shape, or I can use other shapes. So let's go ahead and create another shape, another circle. And I don't want to do it inside the same layer, so I made a mistake right here. Let me go ahead and remove that from that layer. I want to deselect the layer so that I don't create another shape inside the original shape layer. I want to create a separate shape layer that I want to bring down here. I want to rename follower. So that is the one that follows. And then I'm going to go ahead and change the actual size of the path, just like I did with the other one. So let's make this 150 so that we see a difference between the two. Actually, let's make it 100 as well. And so they're one on top of the other. Now, what I want to do on this one here is I want to add code to the actual position of it so that it follows where the other one is. And so before I do that, let me go ahead and animate my master layer. So I'm going to go back to my master, and I want to go ahead and create some sort of animation. So if I place it here, for example, and I'm open up its position, and I want to go ahead and create a keyframe for it there. At around 1 second, I want it to be down here. And at around 2 seconds, I want it to be up here. Now I can modify that path because it's a Bezier path, remember, so I can modify it to whatever I want, whatever shape I want. And let's say that's what I'm looking to work with. So basically it's just swooping down. And then I want that second follower layer to follow this one. So I want to click on that layer to select it, and then I'll press the P key on the keyboard to call its position value. And then remember to add code onto that layer's property. For any property, I will press the Alt key on the keyboard and keeping it pressed, or the Option key on the Mac, and keep that pressed, and then click on the Command key on the Mac, sorry, and then I'll go ahead and click on the stopwatch to open up the window for coding where I will enter the script. Now for this, what I want to do is I want to create, basically, I want to record where the position value for the master is to start with. So I'm going to create a variable called P. So I'm going to select this here, press the P key, Shift and P, so it's a capital P, and that's just a variable name that I made up. So P for position, and then I'll go ahead and you could call it PM for P master, or position for the master. And then I'll go ahead and say equal space, and then what I want to do is use the pick whip right here under the position for the follower to pick up the position value of the master. So now this added that value onto it. It's saying this comp layer master transform position, and then I'll add a semicolon to close that sentence. That basically is the period saying that is the command that I am giving to that particular line. Now, what that is doing is assigning the position value of the master onto the position of my follower. Now, this is looking always at the master if I leave this statement as such. What I want to do is I want to have the subsequent followers look one layer above them. And for that, I am going to replace the word master in here for these words, index, lowercase, -1, where index is the value of the layer, the number of the layer, in this case 2, then -1, it's looking at the position value of the layer that's behind it. So if this was layer 3, for example, it would be looking at the position of layer 2. And that's what we want. We want to look to the layer that's before it and record its position. That's what this is allowing us to do now. Now, let me go ahead and hit return here. And then I want to enter another line of code. And this one is going to create the delay. So for that, I'm going to use a variable that I'm going to create with the letter D, capital D, D for delay. And again, these are just, you could call it burrito. It really doesn't matter what you call the variables as long as you know what they do. So in this case, delay, D, makes sense to me. And then what I want to do at this point is I want to go ahead and add the value of the slider that I had applied on the master to that particular variable. So to do that, let me go ahead and select the master and keep the delay slider available. So I'm going to click on the little lock to keep that window locked. And then what I want to do is I want to go back to my code and I want to grab the pick whip, place my cursor in front of that equal sign, pick with the cursor the value of the slider. And so that adds that value onto that particular variable D. So in order for this to work, I need to add something called a command that is going to allow me to maintain reference to the value of the slider times the position in time, the value in time of each one of the frames that I have within this composition. And that is this comp frame duration. That is what I want to use. So frame duration refers to the duration of each frame within a 1 second value. So what does that mean? Well, a 30th of a second if your FPS is 30 FPS. A 24th of a second if your FPS is 24. That is the value that this is giving it. You're going to take that and you're going to multiply it by whatever value you have on the slider here. So as long as you increase or decrease this value, you're increasing or decreasing the amount of delay that you're creating between one layer and the other, between the position of one layer and the other, or not the position. Right now, we haven't done that yet, but the amount of delay that happens between one layer and the one previous to it. Then let me go ahead and hit enter again, and I'm going to assign the value of P now for position to this layer, to the follower layer. And you do that by doing the following. I'm going to use the value of P, which is this that we had created up here. And then I'm going to press period, and I'm going to say value at time. That's what we want. So we're looking at what is the value of that position, the position of the master. Remember, that's what's inside P. Or in this case, whatever layer is behind it or on top of, layer index -1. So I'm going to say, what is the value on time? Value at time means where in the timeline is my time marker. So it's looking at wherever my time marker happens to be, and it's saying, what is the value at that point? And so with that, I'm going to say time minus D. D being the delay that I am creating via this line 2 in my code. So line 2, like I said, is creating that delay. And so I'm taking a look at where is my marker? What is the value of the position for that layer, the one above it, at that time, and subtract the delay from that value. And so that basically is delaying the value of my position and applying it to the follower. That's what it's doing. So let's go ahead and turn that off really quick. And you'll notice that there is no delay because my value for the slider is 0. But if I make that 1, for example, I am starting to see that my copy is moving away from or past, if I go on the negative value, in front of my master. So let's go ahead and make that 2 so that it's more evident. Now, the reason why I did this and changed the code to index -1 here is so that I could go ahead and make copies of this follower really quick. If I make several copies, the code is going to copy along with them. So if I make several copies, I am basically creating a series of copies of followers that are following my master. Or they're not following my master, they're following each other. Basically, they're following index -1. So the follower is following follower 2 is following follower 3, and so on. And they're delayed by the amount of delay that I'm applying here, minus time, wherever the time marker happens to be, minus that delay. And that's what keeps on pushing them back in time. So that creates that delay, and now everything is controlled by the master. So if I go back to the master and I change the shape of the path, the followers will react accordingly. And so they will all follow based on the code.